Oh, OC's after this.
It's after this. It's at 3.
Oh, that's what.
Everybody's gonna flood over to your presentation because we got high hopes for you, and you are the bomb.com. So just letting you know, if you didn't register for it, it's bananas.
It's the special education part 2. That's the implementation. This is the operations. That's the implementation. Oh, see, I got confused. I can't go because I have a separate meeting, but I'm there in spirit, in Zoom spirit. How's everyone's day so far? Vershawn still has his hat on, the lovely Dallas Cowboys hat.
Listen, this is not just about the Cowboys. I want everybody to be a star. That's why this is on. Everybody's a star in my eyes.
Awful. We about to get the Ravens gear out, the new named Washington, D.C. team gear out.
The Washington unknowns. They don't have an identity.
They are known. Thank you.
Oh, it's always one.
Oh, we got Miss Grant. I didn't even see Miss Grant lost in the Golden State Bridge. Hello, Miss Grant. V, and then where? Oh, Miss Murphy, y'all. My people are all over. I get to see everyone in one place. This rarely happens in the virtual world. Look at this.
Yeah.
We come in droves.
V, who is Kelly? Vershawn and Kelly and the people on the panel. Do you want me to share the questions so people can see them, or do you want me to ask the questions and do it that way? What would be best for you guys?
So here's what I think we could do. First of all, I think if everybody has their camera on, first, we can all have a conversation back and forth where we have our unmutes on. And this is kind of a conversation where we're talking to each other. We're sharing ideas. We're sharing about what's going on, because this is an opportunity for us to discuss from different jurisdictions what's been working and what doesn't work. So we can kind of have a call and response thing. We can use the chat too. We can do both.
And I think also if we start by, so I think also a little introduction. So I'm Chelsea. I am your facilitator for this lovely session. I don't claim to be our Sped expert. The panelists on this panel are. And so we're going to kind of facilitate a conversation like Vershawn said. We have some questions that will be sent out to you guys to know what we guided our conversation on. But it's going to be very fluid. It's my new word. I feel like fluid should be the new word for everyone. It's going to be very fluid in these fluid times. And we are here to answer any questions you guys have on special education. I think just to contextualize it before I shift it over to Kelly V and the panelists, in DC, we are still in session. So this is very much real for us right now, as we are still in term 5 and living and breathing the Sped operations and closing out the current school year and moving to the next school year. So that's kind of the lens we're coming from. And I know in Indiana, you guys are just starting, you're back from summer break and you're coming and it's your second day back. And I know I've now learned a lot about summer schedules. So people are coming back in different times. So let's start with the DC team that's on here. Let's introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we're going to shift it to our other panelists too. So V, start us off.
So I'm Vershawn Terry. I'm one of the managers of Sped in the DC GEC area. Excited to be on this presentation with my team members are on here as well. So welcome.
You get to popcorn it too.
Oh, I'll popcorn. I forgot. Yeah, I'm going to popcorn it to Kelly Murphy.
Okay, so I'm Kelly Murphy. I am a case manager for the DC team at Goodwill Excel. I also teach the 11th grade American Studies Humanities class. And so we are a history class and we focus on American history. And we get into the nitty gritty on Black history a lot, which is very important. But also, which is equally or more important, is my special ed title, which pretty much I am in the classroom to provide those additional supports for the students that are struggling, especially when they get to that level class. It's more intense. So I'm really, really hands-on, or not in this virtual sense, but I provide a lot of assistance for the students who need those additional supports and are constantly emailing and, you know, that type of stuff. So
cool. Murph, who do you want to pass it to?
OC, that's the OC.
Hi, I'm Miss OC. I also work in the DC team, special education. I'm I'm in with the Sped team, which in the DC region is our foundation classes, which we get all the students who have not been in school for a very long time and need to brush up on their math skills. So usually when they first come into the door, they get me first, which is oftentimes a pleasant experience for them as they come into our environment and begin to learn the culture of GEC. Marcia?
Hi, thanks, OC. My name is Marcia Grant, case manager, teacher, work with the humanities department, work with the foundation students, as well as the 12th grade English and history students. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. And I think that's our
Stephanie. So, Steph, are you here?
No, she's not. I think we passed to the other Kelly.
Oh, is it Bethany?
Stephanie. But it does rhyme. It does rhyme.
We'll pass it to the Kelly Ford up there.
We'll pass it to Kelly, all you.
Okay, I'm Kelly Ford, and I am the special ed coordinator at the Excel Center in Kokomo, Indiana. And it's a beautiful place to work. We have an additional person that works in our SPED department. It used to just be me. And that is Jenny Shaw, and she is on here. I asked her to be a part of this as well. And then our wonderful director in our Indiana system is the Room 7 Zoom host. It doesn't say her name, so I'll pass it on to Laura.
Hello, I am Room 7 Zoom host. My name is Laura Cope. I am the Director of Student Services. I've been with Excel Centers here in Indiana for 9 years. I worked in several different roles. Pretty much you name a job, I bet I did it at some point while I was here. But now I have the pleasure of serving all 16 of our schools, working with special education, English language learners, state reporting, scheduling, and registrar's office team. So my view might be a little bit different because I haven't been in the classroom for like 8 years, which honestly makes me sad. But hi, it's nice to meet all of you.
Okay, cool. I think we covered, that's all of our panelists, right? So I think before we start, just to make sure the chat function works, as you know, Rashawn and I learned you need to make sure in our last session. I think as I asked the first question for our participants, when you think about special education compliance in the new times we live in, what's one word that comes to mind, right? So like we're in this new time that's a little bit odd and a little bit different. What's kind of like a word that comes to mind as you think about special education compliance?
Documentation.
You can chat it or you can say it. We have a differentiation of approaches here. Ms. OC, so accessibility, documentation.
Yes, document is key.
I see trauma, someone said, follow-up.
Acceptance.
So as all these words come through, we're going to keep them at the core. I'm going to ask our first question with a lens of looking at the current world and kind of to our panelists so everyone can chime in. So I think Kelly already talked a little bit about that, but what is your special education philosophy at your own Excel centers? So what is your philosophy that you walk with each day in your teams with special education at the Excel centers?
I'll let Kelly Ford pop in.
I think that for the most part, we all fall under the goodwill mission and why we are working at the Excel Centers. And we don't really take that separate into working with the students that have special education services. Because a number of our students really could benefit from the special education services, but maybe they lack the documentation to provide that support legally or extensively at times. So we definitely have a philosophy that second chance and then some. You know, we're talking some of these students that we are working with have, you know, tried to attend, drop, and that's just how their lives are focused. But we definitely have the supportive, nurturing, growth, you can do it attitude. And we don't really separate it from what the actual goodwill mission is. That's That's just how our philosophy, at least at the schools that I've been at and visited in the Excel Center family. But it is different at different locations. So I'm interested to find out like how it is elsewhere and see what you guys' thoughts are.
Yeah, I think for us, it's similar. You said all the same things that, you know, we deal with it, and we think about it from that standpoint. We want to provide unique and individualized experiences, you know, so they can be successful at school, in family, and in life, you know, and we give that same motto of, you know, they're coming back with second, third, and fourth, and fifth, and sixth chances and more. Because, you know, we kind of laugh sometimes. We think, you know, our whole school could be sped or have an IEP or having 504. So our goal is if we can reach our SPED students, then everybody else benefits from it. Because once we open the door for them, it's easy for everybody to walk through. And we kind of take that same lens and that same approach from our foundational classes, even all the way up to our senior classes. We're still following that same approach that works. What works best for SPED students will benefit our general population too, as well as, you know, sometimes when we think SPED, we just think our lower learners, even our students who are really brilliant, who do really well. We enrich and we engage them as well to push their brilliance even further. So it's an opportunity to do that same thing throughout the school.
Okay. And so with that in mind, thinking about how the world we're living in now with coronavirus and moving away from the school, we've had to kind of rethink what our compliance policies are and how we stay in compliance. So what are the moves that you guys have taken in your teams from the teacher end to the infrastructure end to make sure that all these words that came from follow-up, acceptance, patience, trauma, services, documentation are all focused and adhered to, and then also with some practical implementation that you can give to the people sitting here? And I guess we'll start with Vershawn since we're still in this moment right now. And I know Ms. Grant has to leave soon, so we can get some insight from them too.
Cool. Thank you. I'll let OC tap on this one. Go ahead, O.
All right, so in the foundation classes, a big implementation of ours in our Zoom room is to make sure that we have several breakout rooms always open. It's always a chance for a student to be able to express themselves without feeling any shame of other students critiquing them or not. In our class inside, I had a table that was by my desk and everything on the table was red, and they could go in and out of that table in the classroom if they needed me to stop what's going on so they can gain understanding. So in our virtual, they put into the chat, need a space, which means they go to another room. In that room, I go to with them and I explain the concept that my other teacher has already taught. This provides them with the opportunity to ask their question, to gain a deeper understanding, and to take the risk without feeling ashamed about it. Soon as they're done, instead of staying there because we want everybody to excel at the same speed, we then take them back into the classroom. But anytime they need to go back and forth to the breakout, the rooms are always available. Marcia?
Yes, so my approach, if you know me, you're going to hear me say, I'm going to love on some kids today. They're not kids, but they feel like my kids. And so always this trauma-informed notion that you can come however you are, and we're here to support you. You are loved, you are valued, always going back to their sense of humanity, not stripping anything from their core, but always trying to make them feel wholesome. Whatever you bring to the table is enough, and we'll take you from where you are to where you need to be.
I'll piggyback off of what Grant just said. A big thing for me is I'm really good with recognizing anxiety. And so in the virtual world, it's different, but you can listen to the inflations in their voices and stuff like that if they're struggling or and I'm like, so I'm good at kind of diffusing that because that's really a lot of issues that a lot of people are going through. Understanding that virtually it's like, it's new for everybody. Understanding that for some people, they can't manage their work and stuff. So it gets overwhelming. So recognizing the anxiety and pitch in people's voices now is key. because now I can kind of separate them and isolate and say, listen, you're okay. You got this. You're strong. We're going to get it through this. You have extra support. We're here to help you. And so that helps a lot. So really recognizing those triggers and the anxiety or stuff in their voice while you're working with them helps a lot too. And it kind of, you can kind of diffuse them and bring them down, and they feel safe when you do that.
Yeah, I think also to piggyback on those guys, and that's from the implementation standpoint, the things that they do to support all of our students, not just our SPED students, all of them that are in that same category, whether they're IEP 504. From a documentation standpoint, one of the things that I have them do, and we all work together, is we created a Google spreadsheet, right? Is where we're documenting every single day. We're documenting our touch points. We're documenting our communication. So if there's failed communication, we're putting it on our SPED tracker, right? And all of us can access it on the Google site. And we're also putting in, what happened today? Did it work well with them? Did you get in touch with them? If they had an IEP meeting or 504 meeting or SST meeting, we're all keeping that documentation every single day of what happened. Because in this Zoom world, days go really fast, right? And we just want to have some data that shows, here's what we did during the month of March. Here's what we did in April. So we can start recognizing what those trends are. So we can then get out in front of any type of things we may see in the future, maybe with that particular student. And then it allows us to, the SPED case manager, to then collaborate with the academic success coach. Here's what we've been noticing in our trends. What have you been noticing? So now we have some talking points using our SPED tracker. Then on top of that, we have Power School that we document, and we have our special education database system. We're also documenting that information as well. So we have different angles in which we do, and different modalities in which we not only do the implementation part, but we also have our documentation part as well. Because I think there can never be too much documentation.
And Kelly, what about you guys in your setting?
Well, Laura and her team at Central Office came up with an awesome SPED tracker, and basically they sent it out to, they shared it on our team drive, and then each site listed the students and began to use it that way. And we had it for term 5. So we all had the 8 weeks tracker on there, and it was easy for Ginny Shaw and I to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do on Monday. And we, had contact logs, we had text messages, we had Facebook Messenger, we created a Facebook group and invited students to join it, who we saw in our Zoom classes, who we saw in other teachers' Zoom classes. We had all those touch points as well. And, but having that, they saved us so much time.
Oh my gosh.
Our whole spring break to develop it. But it is something that, regardless if we are virtual or not, that's something we should be using. Mm-hmm. And Jenny and I found that some of the stuff we started doing at home and not, interface with students is stuff that we're going to carry on when we're meeting with students. We're back in our classrooms. We're, getting our 40 hours in the building and then some. So, we found that, this virtual life really brought a new aspect that we can take, and lessons learned and hearing from other people of what they're doing and implement that so that we can continue that back into a normal environment. So that's been really beneficial, I think.
I think I'm gonna pop in here, but something that we had daily coach meetings, and towards the end, it was another Zoom meeting at the end of the day, and you were kind of tired, but that's where one coach a day would get on, the teachers would get on, and they had a list of, their concerns. There was also a document that we had that teachers could put their concerns on, but us hearing, you'd hear the same name over and over. We'd kind of pay attention to pick up on our students, and then that was another form of contact that we could then, call them the next day, text them the next day, get on them about, hey, Miss Beth was talking about this the other day, and, they didn't even know we knew. And we could just kind of pop in on them and say, hey, we're still watching. What do you need help with? And that it really did help get a lot of, I'd say a good handful of students to us that thought, okay, they're on our side. They're going to help us. They're not giving up. I might as well give in and start working.
Right.
Awesome. And a follow-up question that came up was, we know documentation is time consuming. That's something we know. And I see people saying yes, especially the ones who are managing the documentation and doing it. So how do you manage and balance the documentation needs with planning and with team meetings and everything like that? And how do you also, another follow-up question was, how do you overlook and validate the documentation is correct?
Well, documentation on the teacher side,
Yep.
as we all understand, the teaching does not stop when the clock stops. And so that is even more evident in the virtual world about making space and making time. If you're me and Chelsea, you're always on the computer all the time. But if you're in a real world where you really want to do some other things, watch TV and have fun, you have to really set aside time to focus on your documentation. It calls for saying today will be documenting in a tracker, and the 45 minutes it takes to do the tracker and the said site and the Power School, and using that 45 minutes just for that. And then your next 45 that you get that day is strictly for lesson planning and strictly for talking with your teacher and coming up with plans. And my co-teacher and I, sometimes our day gets away from us. And so we just say, hey, can I get an hour at 9 o'clock tonight? And so we just decide to get back on Zoom, get back in the classroom at 9 o'clock and just do what we need to do.
I would say in March when it first started, it was a little intense. But as time grew, it became a rhythm. It's like a natural rhythm that it's like, okay, I know at X, Y, Z, at this time, my planning time, I'm going to spend this amount of time setting out my emails. And then emails, I feel like work because you can send similar messages. Now you're going to tweak them towards whatever communication or text messages, something like that, so you can refer back to it. So if you can't get to that document, if you can't get to the tracker right away, you have it on file. So if I have to put it in later in tonight, I can put it in later on tonight. But after a time period, it does, for me at least, I'm grateful that I was able to find a rhythm because it made all the difference. Because at first it was a struggle. It seemed overwhelming. But after a while, it's like within a matter of 20 minutes or so, I can send out my messages, I can put it in the tracker, and it's like effortless ease. So that's for me. Everybody is different, but I will say it was hard at first, but it's not anymore. It's just a natural thing now.
Yeah, and I think for us in DC, because we have so many eyes and ears on us at all times, right? When we think about our state educational agency, OSSE, they're always monitoring us, and not just us, all the schools. Especially from a special education standpoint. So our thing is, it has to get done, not just because someone's monitoring us, because we don't want to, like, for example, this morning, I sat in a meeting with OSSE, 8:30, just going through caseloads, and they'll just grab random caseloads of people and say, tell me about this person. I noticed this is missing or this is here. You know, is there documentation to support it? You know, so one thing we say, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Right? You can tell me all day what you said to the student, what you communicated to the student, but if it's not written down, it's part of your job process. You have to, and you want to tell the story of that student, right? Because we look at it like this. Our philosophy is this: if that student in DC gets up today and they go to Indiana, to Kokomo, in Kokomo, they should be able to read their file and they should be able to tell a story about where they were. Now, there'd be some things we would fill in a conversation, but you should be able to look at their file and see all the documentation in which we communicated, from their service logs, from their related services to, you know, when they've been in class, their grade, their accommodations, all of those things tell a story about that student and all the touch points that we've had. So not only is it required, we have to, if we're really thinking about the greater good of that student, documentation is essential for the success of that student. So everybody has hands-on in that process.
Yeah, and then Kelly, anyone else have anything to add on that balance of documentation? No. So I'm going to ask this question that just came up. We're taking an audible from the pre-written questions because there's lots coming in the chat. So this is a question for students ages 21 and under specifically, or the 21-year age are like heavy compliance age students. How do you manage the compliance for students in the 18 to 21-year-old range who are might be looked at as minors, and the behavioral health services and everything that they get? And I'm going to broaden that question because behavioral health services in the virtual world is an art of its own. So how do you manage and monitor behavioral health services virtually, and then also IEP meetings and everything in that regards as well? The floor is open.
Okay, I'll start, and then I'll popcorn it to Laura or someone. Okay, here we go. So, just balancing it all is definitely a lot, right? First of all, we know when we start talking about our compulsory school age students, right? That documentation and balancing all that is important. So setting a calendar, right? You got to set a calendar for your meetings. Set a calendar for your meetings. Set a calendar to meet with the teacher to do follow-up. Set a calendar appointment to actually communicate with the student, right? That's something that has to get done, right? There's some things that are non-negotiable. Using your Outlook, I always tell our staff, hey, put a calendar invite, because I may forget. Put it on a calendar so we can all know what's going on, what's happening. When is the IEP meeting? Do a follow-up with teachers. Making sure you have those calendars. I see somebody put checklists in calendars. That's definitely true. Those things help us keep us on track. And it's even probably more important now that we're in this virtual world. And I'm assuming that Indiana may be going back to virtual too in the fall when you guys get started. Looks like we're going to be potentially back there too. So having those checklists and calendars to check and recheck and inspect what you expect. So having those there has been very supportive. Create a communication system amongst your team and your individuals in your building.
Kelly and Jenny, what about you guys?
Yeah, Ginny made the comment checklist and calendars. I mean, that's our morning meetings.
Yeah.
Need to get done today. What meetings do we have today? You know, it's covering each other, you know, because we do the remedial math classes as well. So I want to make sure if Ginny's teaching a class during a term that she has opportunity to meet her teaching requirements as well, the grading and input and having everything done, and then dividing up our time to attend conferences, work on IEPs, especially if we have a difficult student that we're not really sure how to, you know, write a goal for, or we're lacking data because they're not attending regularly, or something.
That's a big one, yeah.
You know, I mean, we are constantly making sure that we're checking all those boxes for all of our students and all the requirements. It is overwhelming at times. And I saw that Laura had put on there, like, if we didn't have it done by Friday, we could expect that we would need to at least get it done over the weekend, or else we're going to get an email from our compliance monitor in Indiana. So, you know, like, hey, you're not doing your tracker isn't up to date, because they had access to all of our trackers. They could answer those questions.
I would say our checklists, we have checklists for everything, and we you know, we have this for an IEP, this for a 504, this is the, you know, checklist of protocols, and we're constantly adding, you know, it would help if we did this before, or if you did this part and I did, you know, just revising that and then using those, not just making it and setting it aside and then trying to be respectful of the time. Like, if, you know, that had to be done by Friday, we knew, tried to do parts of that tracker through the week so that we weren't struggling to get it done on Friday. You know, we just kind of, like everyone says, you just break your stuff into pieces, and then we broke those pieces into what she does and what I do, and then it just kind of comes together. But it's just a lot of pre-planning and checklists and clipboards.
There's no way around it.
So one of the questions that just popped up, and I'm going to ask Ivy your question in a second, but to finish out this documentation checklist processing is, how do you, when someone is, so we're getting into related services, and obviously services that had to be made up for last year. How do you guys communicate to, one of the questions that came up was, how do you communicate to the student what they need? And if a student's unengaged, how do you work to re-engage them? I know in DC we've used Zoom rooms as a form of that, but what are some methods to re-engage a student and to also communicate a student's IEP needs to them if they aren't engaged in school?
So I will use all forms of communication. So at some point, I have spoken to every student on my caseload, haphazardly, maybe one person popped up one random time, but I will exasperate all options as far as emailing, text, whatever I can to get in contact with you. I will try my best, and it's the wording. So I realize, like, if it's just a generic, I have a Zoom meeting, my office hours, I'm not going to get a response. But when I put certain emphasis on words such as IEP meeting coming up, or you have X amount of assignments that your teacher is saying it needs to be complete, certain language like that, they tend to get a response quicker as far as getting them re-engaged. But just a generic thing, they'll go weeks without talking to you if they're not engaged. So I realized that. So when I start mentioning key things like how is your class, I realize you have a certain percent in your class, because if it's just how are you doing in classes, you're not going to get a response. How are you doing? You have a 24% in this class. Can I help you? Because it seems as if you need assistance, that gets more of attention than just a generic statement. That's what I noticed.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like saying like, I've even went as far as saying like, obviously this is difficult. It's difficult for me too. And I would much rather help you in person than on my iPad and share it to you on a Zoom to help you get through algebra. And just tailoring it back, like, is this too much? I've had those conversations with students and just letting them know, like, I'm not hounding you because I don't, because that's my job. I want to help you, but if you ignore me, I'm going to keep bothering you. And then it seems like I'm just bothering you. And then you don't want any help from me. So I would try to meet them in the middle and be like, is this too much? Like, tell me the truth. Like, what can I do to help you? And one of our students that was on our term 5 roster to graduate, it was, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this. And, for the last 2 weeks of the term, I was like, all right, I'm coming over. and I talked to her dad, and she was a minor student. And I talked to her dad, and he was totally fine. Like, if you can help her, we worked across the table from each other, but I would be on my computer, she would be on her computer. And it was, you have to explain these in person and help work this stuff through. And ended up graduating. So, I mean, it was, the stuff like that I'm willing to go that extra mile if you are, especially for a grad.
Yeah.
And I knew she wanted it. So I was like, if you're going to put in the work, I'll get you through Serve Safe for, 10 hours and go over a practice test with you and read it to you while you're sitting across your table from me.
Yeah.
And
So,
I would say what Kelly just said, and Vershawn sits with one of our students, Miss Mann, for hours on end in a very similar fashion. And I think our Sped team, I shout them out tremendously, because I think when we own our students who are in our compliance quarter, we own them, right? So it's like, how do we then take compliance, and especially if they're a grad, Kelly, that really hits home too, because they're looking to you, and there's this like hopelessness kind of factor that's going on. And I know that Miss Murphy, people have dropped laptops off to students, people have driven them if they can't get there. And I think we have a higher degree to responsibility of closing the loop for our special education students. Someone asked, and I saw Murphy responded, the age of our students in DC is IEP services up to 22, and then 504s are any age. And Kelly and Jenny, is it the same ages with you guys?
yeah. So if they turn 23 during the school year, they age out to a 504 plan.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank
So,
I think sorry.
Oh, no,
I
you
was
go.
just gonna say, like Kelly said, a plan of attack is, like you just said that, Chelsea, they feel helpless. So coming to them with a plan, you know, you revise that plan as you work with them, but coming to them with some sort of what you think is a solution or a way to get from A to B gives them a little bit of hope and kind of makes them work, you know, gives them a little push.
So Ivy asked a question about assessments. So we're clearly living in the virtual world and we need to create baseline data and kind of get goals in order and living, I laugh at this because most of our assessments are different right now. So what assessments do you use to get baseline and progress data, and how are you monitoring assessments and growth in this area that we live in?
Oh, see, you want to talk about what you guys do in the math labs?
And also, and OC, will you talk about how we haven't done the iReady because we haven't been on site?
Yes. So in our classes, because we are foundation, we normally, when they come in to enroll, they take a math test, which gives us a baseline score of what class they should be in, if it's our foundation A class or if it's the foundation B class, which only is separated about by 10 or 15 points, but it's the difference between third and fourth grade and fifth and sixth grade. Because we were not able to do that for term 4 or for term 5, we decided, well, since they're not going to take a baseline test, we're going to just throw them in the fire. So what we did was on week 1, we gave them an assessment of things that we would normally teach them through the process of 8 weeks. And so once we realized where everyone was, that's where we started teaching the skills. So we had a class last term where we got them all the way up to pre-algebra. So they knew all the foundations of pre-algebra, leaving our class, going to pre-algebra, where there were some students who were lower on the line. And so we were able to teach them the foundational skills, the reading stuff that I won't go into. You have to come to the next PD. The problem solving and interpreting data. And so even now, as we are monitoring students, because we don't have the regular tests that we would use, like Brigance and things like that, we take the assessments that we give within the classroom, and because we've done modifications to them, we can tell where they've grown from. So if I had a student and I did modifications and said we had 10 assessment questions and I told you to do 5, the way I monitor your progress is by week 7, I have you do 7. And so as I grow the problems that you do, I'm growing to see if you are able to keep up with your peers, or if I still need to scale back, how close are you? So when you do progress reports and it says, are they making progress or not accomplishing anything? There's your baseline, there's your data. That's how you roll it out. So you're not just writing, oh, they didn't make no progress because I didn't see it. You could go, I could go to Miss Kelly and say, I say Miss Kelly, she got 2 first names. Go to Murph and say, hey, Murph, how are they doing in reading? And so Murph would say, oh, well, when I read it to them, they do good. And so she could show me a document that they did in the classroom. And then I can say, okay, the student's making progress because the last time we assessed them, they were in 3rd and 4th grade, but now we see that they're reading better, they're comprehending more.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, I think also too, even whether we're in virtual world and even in the brick and mortar, you know, I think a lot of times informal assessments gives us some of the best data, right? And we know formal assessments, taking all your different Wilcox-Johnsons and all your different type of formal tests, those are important. We got to have that data too. But sometimes getting that data from that informal data from the teachers, because they're seeing that progress from when they started to when they make achievement. And that's real data that we can use when we start talking about data versus, you know, we having our school psychologists or somebody from the outside come in and doing a formal assessment. They might not be performing well on that day, right? And we might not get the data we think we're going to get because it just doesn't work. And sometimes getting that informal data from class and getting those little quizzes and getting those classroom assignments, that's great data right there that you can use to make determinations. And we use all of that coming to the table. And also on top of the fact that we use the formal data as well. But we definitely use that. Hopefully that answers your question about assessments. And it's going to be tough during this time. I know for us, we just sat with a couple additional contractors trying to figure out what it's going to look like for COVID when we come back, because, you know, got to have all of these, you know, this criteria to do in-face assessment, because now I don't know if the licensure board is going to let certain things go, because some tests have to be done in person. Some tests have to be, you know, with the actual specialist. You can't do anything online, certain parts of it. So we'll see what that looks like coming back. We had a 504 question. I
Yeah,
wanted
I was going to ask, so I'm going to ask it, it's Kim's question, and so Kelly and everyone, so here's the question. The question is, how do you identify people who need a 504 who are coming into your school? I'm going to put a caveat saying that, like, we know not everyone who had a 504 has a flag that says I need a 504, and especially now that they're not in your building, they're in Zoom. How do you identify and observe people who might need a 504, and what's your identification process look like in your schools?
Most people come with, Kim, most people come. So we're not talking about, if we're talking after, you asked about after 21. I know someone mentioned after 21. I mean, a 504 can go even before the age of 21. There's no designated age for 504. And it comes from the section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We're pretty much saying it coincides with ADA and IDA, but it pretty much says that if there's anything that's limiting you from accessing life's activities, that could be, you know, cognitively, that could be a mental disability. It could be any of those things, but it has to be documented. You have to have documentation. You just can't slap somebody with a 504 and say, hey, you got a 504. There has to be, you could do assessment. They could have had IEP that aged out and you still have that hardcore documentation. They could have, you know, somebody could have had something where they had a physical ailment, and like we have a person in our room, he's partially blind, but he had documentation of that. So there's some accommodations. We gave him a 504, and there's some accommodations we put in place for him in different classes. He has a larger screen monitor than everybody else that has a huge magnifying glass on it. And, you know, so it just depends on their disability. And the biggest thing is the documentation part, Kim, making sure they have that documentation to verify that they do have that disability. It can't just be saying, yeah, I don't feel well, you know, or, you know, I got ADHD. Well, do you have documentation? I have ADHD too, but, you know, I can have documentation of it, you know, and that's the biggest part. And when we say at any age, there's literally any age, as long as they have the documentation, they can take it from school, they can take it to work, use it in their work field, and they can't be, the idea is not to be discriminated against.
Right. We actually had a student, she's 72, and she had a history of learning difficulties when she was in high school the first time. And I referred her to Voc Rehab, and she got tested, and there's the documentation. We have all current testing for our 72-year-old student to write a plan to help support her in the classroom appropriately. You know, but that's another thing, you know, if a student, you know, is struggling and can't provide that documentation, and you don't get anything back when you request records from their previous schools or anything like that, connection to vocational rehabilitation services is huge. And I know Laura can speak for how the Indianapolis area operates heavily with their disability services in the past, and then connection to Voc Rehab. And we do that in even remote locations from our capital. So, but that's been very helpful to refer students to, and it's not that she, you know, I'm not even sure that she went in there saying that she wanted to get a job, but she's willing to go to school to graduate. And this is something she wanted to do. And she had, you know, she had the drive to help herself get through school with supports. So she took that step to get to those services that are offered.
And I think, so I've been faulted for not looking at the clock. So it's 2:52. So I think one more question to kind of give people resources, then we'll let anyone else who has other questions. I mean, one more question to have you guys leave with tangible resources. And then anyone else who has a question, please type it in the chat box and I'll kind of ask it to the panel, or we'll unmute yourself in a second and just ask it. So to our panelists here, our final question from me is going to be, what are some actual resources that people can go out and get and use to support their special education students that you found have worked in this world and or in the building, and that you think would be beneficial for the not the panelists, the people sitting on this panel to use in their schools and with their students? So that could be anyone. I would also randomly call on the panelists too.
So I know myself, I found out that using the whiteboard inside of Zoom is sometimes tricky if you don't have your handwriting with the stylus or your finger really good. So I had my lovely husband assistant to install whiteboards in my office. So myself and my co-teacher now have whiteboards in our offices at home. And so we actually turn the monitors towards the whiteboard and we work it out on the board just like we would in the classroom. For a student, that is priceless because it's just a little $12 whiteboard, but for them, they get to see you in action right there inside of your home doing what we do. On the first day of class, we do it's fun for them, but it's really helping us. We do a scavenger hunt of your house. So they come to class and we tell them, okay, the first person to come back to the camera with a notebook. Some of them have one with them. Some of them run around the house hollering, I need a notebook, I need a notebook. We talk about a pencil, 2 pencils sometimes, because 1 pencil is easy. Our fun one for this time was a calculator because all of them were using their phones, which is normally their calculator in class if they don't use one out of our resource bucket. So to have them actually run through their house looking for a calculator that so many of us don't even have in our houses anymore, it is fun to get them to know what they need for each day to make sure that they're ready for class, but it's also a way to get them engaged in doing as much as they can inside of the classroom.
I'll say for our class, one thing we have enjoyed using, which is helpful, and the students love it when they don't understand. So some of our students are much older and don't know how to use the computer well. So in this virtual world, they pretty much have to. So because we're upper level class, when they can't navigate, this little green button on the bottom, screen share, has been really helpful because now we can see where they're stuck at and we help navigate them to wherever they need to be. And so that has been a great tool as far as in the writing classes. It has been helpful helping to navigate students and helping us see whatever they're talking about, because we can't really see what they're struggling with face to face. But when they click that button, it helps soothe them. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I see what you're talking about. So that's a good asset to have if you teach certain classes. It works a lot.
Awesome. And then Kelly, Jenny, I know there's Laura put a bunch in the chat, so you might want to copy and paste all of that too. This is a great final question because I know we end at 3, which is, and I'm laughing because Rashawn's gonna laugh when he hears this, is how do you get people to participate in Zoom with their camera on? So how do you get people to participate in Zoom?
What OT?
So the one thing that I did, not intentionally, but unintentionally with our students is, if you all know me, when I go to work, I'm dressed up. My hair's done, clothes are on. It's a fashion show, right? Just me, that's me. So what I did when we went in the virtual ward, I wore pajamas every day, even to our Sped meeting. I have to show y'all the cutest pajamas every day on purpose so that our students will understand it does not matter what you have on. Mm-hmm. Because I have a male co-teacher, I used to always say, as long as it's appropriate. So it can be pajamas as long as it's appropriate. So I had days, which was not on purpose, where my hair was a wreck. And so I would just turn the camera on and they would be like, what? Miss OC, what happened? Like, we've never. And so I'd be like, well, we're at home. And so it got them to really feel comfortable with bonnets and head rags and kids crying, because we would be like, oh, go get the baby. and they would feel comfortable with understanding, we know you're at home, we know things are happening, just take care of home, but get back to learning.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think that's good. I was going to say the virtual backgrounds, Laurel said it, but that's what we do. I'll change backgrounds. I end up changing my name several times just to keep it fun, just make it interesting. You know, I would take pictures of my team and put them in my background just for fun. You know, this picture of my team here, and just to create a fun atmosphere for the students. You know, maybe it's an opportunity to say, all right, listen, tomorrow we're gonna have sports teams background. Get your sports teams, or you know, tomorrow's gonna be your favorite music artist background. You know, to make it fun, so they'll know it's okay. And I think Miss OC hit is if we come normal to them, we make it normal. Like it's not a problem. I got you. So what? You got your bonnet on. It's okay. You know, it is what it is. But we're there to support you across the process. Yeah, Miss OC does come dressed up all the time. So, but I think keep it fun. Keep it fun. Keep it light. Don't make it a big deal. And as many times try to encourage. Maybe you want to provide extra points in the classroom for just having your Zoom, your camera on. Hey, you come in and say, oh, I see Kelly got this is elementary. Kelly got her Zoom on. I like that, Kelly. That's 5 points for Kelly. I mean, that all adds up at the end of the day. It adds up to something. So providing that encouragement to get those Zoom on and play some music when they come in the classroom with the Zoom background, maybe get the one that moves around, whatever. So, you know.
Pat, I also see DoorDash. We have given out a ton of gift cards as well. So
Yeah.
virtual gift cards have been the name of the game for NDC as well, and budgeting for that. So from our standpoint, our next year's budget includes a lot of virtual gift cards for students. Miss OC has to go. Shout her out. Go OC. She's about to go to her next session. Go join her in the Zoom room, whatever room number, Zoom room fun for Miss OC in the next one. I know that we're basically out of time. So it was a pleasure having you guys. A big shout out to our panelists up there. How do you change your backgrounds? V, do you want to tell someone how they change their
Go
virtual
to the video where it says stop video on your screen, and it'll say choose virtual background. And then you can, like, I'm gonna put a picture of my house. No, that's not my house. I'm just joking. It just feels like it's my house. I'm not there yet. But yeah, you can just change it. Thanks everybody for coming. Had fun.
Laura and